My name is Carola Hartley, and I am the author of two rather new books on the history of Opelousas. One is called Opelousas First, and what this book is about is some of the first things that occurred throughout history, going back to the very early days and even, to the 21st century. So it covers a little bit about a lot of different things about Opelousas. One of the things that I talk about in Opelousas First is the coming of the railroad and how that impacted the growth of what we know today as the city of Opelousas. Of course, we know Opelousas goes way back, and there's some very early histories, like Winston DeVille did a great book called Opelousas that talks about the colonial period. My book goes further along into the the past, but the future of the colonial period. So the coming of the railroad had a great impact. They started talking about the railroad in Louisiana in the 1830s. And they tried a railroad in New Orleans. It didn't work out really good because there really wasn't a lot of support. So for many, many years, like 20 years, this talk went on. And finally in the early 1850s, there was a railroad, a few railroad companies the legislature actually helped to create. They tried to get funding. They actually had a railroad tax. And one of the railroads was coming to Opelousas from New Orleans. It was called the Opelousas the Opelousas Great Western and Western Railroad from New Orleans to Opelousas, and eventually was going to go on to Texas and to the west. So they started to build it in the 1850s, and people got very excited. In fact, one man bought some very valuable property at the time in downtown Opelousas because he heard the depot was going to be located near there. Excuse me, and he built this huge hotel. Well, the railroad didn't come there. He even named his hotel the Railroad Hotel. And it was supposed to be a very big place. It's where near where Bodemuller Motors was located in Opelousas today. So it was, right in the center of what was the commercial district at that time. Eventually the hotel had to close because the railroad took so long in coming to Opelousas, and just about the time they thought it was going to really be completed in there, the Civil War happened. So that also stopped the railroad completely, and it didn't really start the trend of bringing the railroad back until after the period of Reconstruction in Louisiana. So it was actually 1882 before the first train finally made it to Opelousas. But when that happened, that's when the town really started to grow because people could come in. It didn't take as long to travel there. People could travel also out of town. So all of this started to happen. Opelousas became a very popular place to be. It's considered a beautiful town. 1901, they say it was the most progressive town in the South, or one of the most progressive towns. So the railroad really impacted the economy, but it also impacted the population because people visited, then they decided they want to settle. So we had a lot of new people come in as a result, new businesses, so on and so forth. And then in 1907, some local people put together a railroad they called the Opelousas Gulf and Northeastern. It was called the OG. A lot of people today remember the OG Railroad. That was all local people who formed that railroad company. And basically what it was, it took people from Crowley to Opelousas to Millville. And they sort of did that route the whole time. And eventually it went out of business, but people knew the OG Railroad. I want to say it probably went on till maybe the 1940s or 50s. So, other things, of course, are covered in the book Opelousas First. It's a variety of subjects. As you can imagine, the first church, the first whatever. So we discussed that. The other book that's sort of a companion to it is one called Opelousas Tales. And Opelousas Tales is a collection of 22 stories, short stories on things that happened in Opelousas that related to the town in some way, or maybe people associated with those stories. So it covers things from the 1800s into the 1900s, and even in 1970s and 1980s. There's stories about the old hotel. There's a wonderful story in here about the history of the old governor's mansion that unfortunately we just lost. But there is a movement now to do something on that property. There's a foundation that's been formed. And the reason I say that is because I wanted to make sure everybody knew that on November the 10th, as part of this old governor's mansion foundation, one of the things the foundation is going to do is offer educational programs, historic preservation training, workshops, things of that sort, partnering with universities and the like. Also, it's to promote women of the parish and some of the good things that women have done in St. Andrew Parish, usually working behind the scenes. Because a long time ago, women, didn't get credit for a lot of things they do. We have some women who did fascinating things throughout the whole history of St. Andrew Parish. So November the 10th is the first event, something called the St. Andrew Parish Women Hall of Fame. That's something that this foundation has created, and every year they're going to induct women who are notable, who have done some you don't know about, some you just know the accomplishments they made but don't really know them, you know what I mean? So the first 5 are going to be November the 10th, and we'd like people to support this. And again, every year in March during National Women History Month, there's going to be another induction ceremony, and women from throughout the parish are eligible any decade. This first one starts in the 1700s and goes to Mrs. Del Perro, who is still living today, and she's one of the inductees this year. So I just wanted to ask you to consider that. In the book Opelousas Tales, there's a story of Miss Susan Walker Andy, who is going to be inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame. Because of her, we have Highway 190. We have a blood bank in Louisiana. Women got the right to vote. We also, the Evangeline State Park in St. Martinville, these were all projects that she pushed for, worked on. She was appointed by many presidents to groups for good roads in America, and oftentimes was the only woman on the panel with men during this time period. So that's a little bit something about my books and some of the things that it's leading to. And I thank you. And books are available at Bodemuller the printer, or people can contact me. Thanks.